Halloween is about acknowledging fears as a part of yourself. You dress up as something you're afraid of because becoming and accepting that fear is the same as overcoming it. And overcoming fears and adversity in general is what D&D is all about. I was in a rush to plan 2 unique Halloween sessions for 2 different campaigns, so I came up with a method that I think works reasonably well to create some spooky themed experiences for my tables. One thing to keep in mind first, to have a fun Halloween gameplay experience, I knew I had to be okay with some railroading. While that's normally bad, I wanted my Halloween sessions to play out from beginning to resolution in one sitting. So, I worked out a system with 3 basic steps. First, choose an influence. Scary movies are a great place to start because most have seen some amount of them, and so we speak that language. If your players don't know the danger of looking behind you when you're alone in a dark room, then they're missing out on half the fun of the Halloween vibe. Second is about structuring your adventure or using some sort of system to track the exact order of events as they should proceed. And finally, atmosphere. D&D is already a game with scary monsters and ancient crypts, so we need to nail a Halloween atmosphere of pumpkins, costumes, trickery, or whatever fits. So digging deeper in, first let's talk about influence. One of my favorite movies is the original Alien film. I love the claustrophobic sets and the idea of being trapped somewhere with no escape, and the body horror of the movie that kind of captures the feeling of fragility, and that's hard to nail in D&D when your character can turn into a bear or run 150 feet in 6 seconds. But I thought these aspects of the movie would fit into a campaign of mine that takes place in Eberron, where the party is currently beneath Sharn, a populous magical city built on top of ancient ruins. And also going with the alien theme, I thought that a Slod would be an appropriate challenge for them. They're level 5, and that has the same kind of body horror thing to it. The second session that I already did was a homebrew game, kind of doing a Spelljammer type thing, and I decided to get less specific with my influences and just try and achieve a murder mystery or slasher type environment. A murder mystery is great because it encourages roleplay and kind of propagates this feeling of paranoia that's really cool. That party's currently on a desert planet in a small, tight-knit Thri-Kreen community that they're helping out. And of course, the classic answer for murder mysteries in D&D is a werewolf. So I brewed up a difficult werebug monster for them to confront after finding clues. Okay, so the point is I chose an influence for both of these that I knew my players would be familiar with, because I know that having these cultural reference points helps players embody the characters to play in those circumstances. Next, here's how I went about fleshing out the structures of these ideas. So for the campaign in Eberron, I was looking at the classic hero's journey or monomyth story circle to figure out how I wanted things to proceed. I decided to have the party begin in an underground town where the inhabitants search the ancient ruins for artifacts that they sell to surface dwellers. They could find guides here to help them navigate the ruins where the drow mage that they were chasing the previous session had fled to, or they could just see the sights, visit a tavern, typical stuff. And inside the ruins where they would eventually go, they'd get separated by some falling walls and encounter traps and clues as to what happened, and figure out that the mage had summoned something from the plane of chaos, and they would find the corpse of that drow mage with his rib cage busted open from the inside. And then finally they'd confront the Slod before the infection would get to the city above, and maybe some of them will get infected before it's finished, and who knows. So that's the first one. For the homebrew game, I instead planned how the murder would happen, like what happened the night before, and then why the party would need to solve it. So I had some stakes. I decided that these Thri-Kreen, they're nomadic, so they need to go in a couple days, and if they go with a murderer in their midst while they're vulnerable, that'll be bad news for them. So I used these details to come up with some locations and clues at those locations that the party could address in whatever order they wanted to, and then they'd have to confront the big bad killer, who they could find because it wasn't that hard, and have a big boss battle just after sunsets. So the point of that being, structuring the story of your Halloween session ahead of time is a quick way to understand how you can get a satisfying beginning, middle, and end in the 3 to 5 hours that most games usually go for. Finally, the most important thing is the atmosphere. Like I said, D&D is already a creepy game by nature, so differentiating the type of creepiness is very important for nailing the vibe. For the Eberron game, I decided that the underground village they were in would be populated by weird but harmless characters like goblins, Dwergar, and deep gnomes. I also took time to pre-write some descriptions about the settings, so let's look at a few examples to see how effective they are. You find yourself in an open section of cave, lit by a shapeless orange glow from the walls. Multiple rickety structures dot the cavern, and many moving shapes shamble and shuffle about. In the musty air is only silence, and the occasional drip of a stalactite into green pools where even water sizzles and disappears. You brush cobwebs out of the way of a crooked sign that appears to have lost some words with age. It reads, "Welcome to Glumfall. Stay." You see a small goblin peeking at you from behind a lichen-covered rock, and a Dwergar meandering between dilapidated structures, muttering with a pickaxe in hand. So that was for the town. This one is for the ruins where they end up. The ruins of the old goblin city beneath Sharn have seen the wear of thousands of years. A moldy red carpet is barely held together by its decaying fibers, and water drips from the cracked ceiling. You see wet footprints leading from the puddle into the dark of an open corridor. So if you choose to do this and pre-write some descriptions, then I would highly recommend putting some clues or things to go interact with at the end of the paragraph so there's a hook. And for the homebrew campaign, I needed the buggy desert world to feel full, so I thought about the Thri-kreen social structure, and I decided that 2 tribes had recently banded together, so maybe some dissenter from either group was committing murders to pick off the other side or falsely implicate them. Aesthetically, it didn't make as much sense to have like pumpkin patches or scary ghouls around, so I wanted the paranoia to do the heavy lifting. And for both adventures, I actually used the NPC tables on page 89 and 90 to create 5 or 6 NPCs quickly for each. Basically, I would roll a trait, I would roll a skill, and then I would roll and I would roll a mannerism. And basically I would kind of interpret those to be, what is this person all about? What do they act like? And maybe do they have some secrets that are relevant? So that's the 3 steps that I took. I already played both these games, so I'm going to review what worked and what didn't. So I thought the Eberron campaign went great. A red slot was a decent boss monster. The NPCs came out interesting enough, and separating them in the ruins was also a good move that freaked them out. They don't split the party, so everybody hates when that happens. It's really fun. And the pre-written descriptions definitely helped capture the atmosphere. I didn't mention before, but I also had written out a brief series of creepy journal entries with some clues for the main story apart from this Halloween adventure. And so as we were playing, I did end up cutting some things out for time, but I was okay with that because I still got to that end point with hitting all the scary notes I wanted to along the way. Again, that structure wasn't there to facilitate how the actual game was going to go, but let me think it through in my mind, and I was happy with how that worked. The homebrew story, I'll admit, was a little rockier. It was still fun, but I don't think it captured that Halloween vibe as much as I wanted. The specificity of influence and structure for the other campaign, for the Eberron campaign, definitely helped sell it. The NPCs came out well, so that's the takeaway, is no matter what structuring elements you want to use or influences, planning out your NPCs to have specific behaviors and mannerisms will help populate that world with interesting things. If I were to change something, I would set it during some like multi-day harvest festival, like a real Halloween-y type thing where all the Thri-kreen go around with masks on and get up to stuff. That would just make it for a creepier, more Halloween-specific setting. So that about wraps it up, but before I finish, I want to give you a puzzle you can use in your adventure that fits the Halloween themes. I call it Skulldle. It's a bit clunky, but it's essentially Wordle, which is just culturally irrelevant enough now that people won't see it coming. I hope. Essentially, it's a room full of skulls. Each skull has a letter carved on the forehead, and you put them in braziers trying to spell a 5-letter word. And if you get it wrong, or if you get any number of letters wrong, those skulls come to life and have some different effect based on their bite. It's a fun, goofy, kind of chaotic puzzle. Definitely check out the PDF link in the description. So that's it from me. There are a couple days before Halloween officially starts, so hopefully if you see this will help you plan out a fun Halloween session for your group.